by James this afternoon. And one of the reasons that I say this, and some of you all heard me say this yesterday, is that James has been where you've been as an Ulster student, been on a similar career path and came across maybe similar challenges that you are currently facing, or maybe think that might come along. And I know that during the week, James had said to me, I wish that the university had put on this Future Skills Week event for me when I was a student, because I learned the hard and sometimes painful way. So hopefully he will take a little bit of the pain out of your self-management and accelerating that. So just a very quick reminder, please feel free to use the chat box, ask questions or make comments. And if you want to ask James a question verbally, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen there. And James will endeavour to answer as many questions as possible in our hour together this afternoon. So finally, just to remind you, this session will be recorded. It will be made available on the Future Skills Week website later this week. So before we kick off, just respectfully remind you we're now in a professional virtual environment, and ask that if you haven't already done so, please mute your microphone. So James, once again, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. You are very welcome, and I will now pass over to you.
Thank you very much, Glenda, and good afternoon to everyone. This is the afternoon, isn't it? Yes, it is. It's the afternoon. So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks very much for joining us for this particular session. And what I'm going to do is, folks, this is maybe the most this is the third session I've given this week, and the title is probably the most obscure, and accelerated self-management. And I want to put this in a bit of context. I was promoted quite early in my career. So this time, say 10, 12 years ago, I was in a fairly senior position, and I really struggled. I'm going to be honest with you. I really struggled. So at the age of 28, I was a staff manager of 17 trainee accountants. They all used to be my friends. I had a massive client portfolio, etc., etc. And the first issue that happened was, because I was really good at my job as a trainee accountant, they thought I was going to be a really good manager. And sometimes that does not happen. Now, what I'm going to tell you guys is, going to give you a few things to think about how to manage yourself, and a few tools and techniques how then you can go and manage other people. Okay, so I'm not going to talk really that much about managing other people. I want to talk about managing yourself, because that is the platform. That is the stuff that I learned the hard way that Glenda was talking about. So hopefully this will give you a bit of a kickstart and a bit of a jump start in that direction as well. Okay, let me go on to the next slide. Now, anybody knows me knows I love a bit of crack. I love a laugh. I love a bit of fun. So I'm going to do something quite interesting in this part. Now, what I want you to do in the chat box, and if the guys in the employability team want to note down maybe some of the interesting ones, write down something, one of your greatest accomplishments in your life to date. And I'll share with you at the end a couple of mine. Okay, so feel free, let's get the conversation rolling. In the chat box, write down one of your greatest accomplishments, and if the guys can note a couple of the more notable ones, we'll talk about that at the end as well. Okay, so I'm going to give you a really quick bit about me, and for the guys who have came to a couple of my sessions earlier in the week, I'm really sorry, you've probably heard this one before, but who am I? And a tip I've given everyone during the week is that, folks, if someone asks you who you are, most people will say your job title, or that you're a student or whatever. Try and do it in a very different way. I tell people who I am in 4 words: carer, coach, academic, and adventurer. And the word adventurer normally makes people ears, they prick up a bit and they want to know more. So have a think about how you're ever going to introduce yourself to someone. Bit of my background: I'm a fellow chartered accountant with Chartered Accountants Ireland, and my background has always been in accounting. So I done my master's degree with University of Ulster in advanced accounting a number of years ago now. Background has always been accounting. In terms of my professional career, I was a trainee accountant and went up the ranks with a firm called Grant Thornton, And then I went into industry after a number of years with Grant Thornton, and I was financial controller of that beautiful blue drink called WKD. Believe it or not, I was financial controller of that particular business. I then went into the public sector, but lo and behold, I had an idea about 4.5 years ago, and literally I built a business from it. I woke up in the middle of the night with an idea of how to coach accounting students through their exams and to give them career development. And lo and behold, here I am, 4.5 years down the line with that business. And also, I'm a part-time teaching fellow with Ulster University as well. So that's a wee bit about me in a nutshell. Now, let's move on to some information here, and I've got lots of information for you today. Okay, so one thing we want to do, folks, is we want to become leaders because that's what really gets you noticed, both personally and professionally in your career. If you become a leader, you're well on the way to becoming noticed, and it accelerates where you're going to move forward. And there are 5 different aspects that I see, and I'm just going to touch on one element. But there's neuroagility, how we process things emotionally, and the word I've highlighted there is self-awareness. I'm going to talk a lot about that today. That's really the crux of the talk today. There's mentally, then in terms of trying to defeat those negative thoughts to move forward. There's social agility, which I touched upon yesterday regarding building a reputation and building a network. And then there's a spiritual agility, and I'm not talking in any way sort of religious or belief systems, but it's your values. And that's what I mean more about a spiritual agility. But the key thing I want to touch upon today is under emotional agility, and that's self-awareness of you. Because if you can manage yourself more and you're more self-aware of yourself, you can actually then lead people. It's much easier. So one acronym that I really want you to remember is the word l.e.a.d.s, l.e.a.d.s. So if you want to really move forward in terms of your management and performance management of both yourself and of other people, think of that acronym. Listen, the most important skill that you can develop, and I'm going to touch upon that a little bit later on. Empowering other people, not just yourself. Empowering others is a hugely important skill. Adaptability to change, again, important to be resilient. I know there's been a number of talks regarding that. I'm going to very briefly touch on it. Deliver, so delivering results, that's what it's all about at the end of the day. But how do you actually deliver results that's noticeable, and how can you communicate that you delivered value? That's something for you to think about. I could go on for days about that, but that's something for you to think about. But look at the bottom there again, self-awareness. Ultimately, what I want to talk about today is how are you going to manage yourself in order to manage other people. So that's the whole thing about accelerated self-management. And folks, I wish I knew so much of this before I was into senior management more than 10 years ago. Would have made things much, much more easier for me. So hopefully a few hints and tips that will really be useful for you. And the importance of some of this. A couple of quotes here. I'm not going to read out the quotes, but I want to highlight the couple of key points there. Jack Welch, I think, was chairperson of General Electric. I think got the biggest golden handshake ever in history, some amount of multi-millions of dollars. But if you look at the main words there in his quote, growing yourself. And also with Peter Drucker, who's a leading management consultant and management author, talking about taking charge of your own energy. So if your cup is half empty, how can you go and lead others, and how can you move yourself and other people forward if your battery is half empty? Okay, so a few things to think about with that. So I'm going to touch upon that. Now, this slide, if people were with me on Monday, they would recognize this particular slide, and I'm not going to go through it in any great detail. The only thing I'm going to point out is the top right-hand corner. That's our good old friend, the wee monkey, right? Have you ever witnessed the wee monkey getting into your head and running the controls, and things don't go as they seem, and you're racked with self-doubt, etc.? The only thing I want to point out in this slide is I want you to think about locking away the monkey. and I'm going to tell you a number of tools and techniques whenever this sort of doubt crops up about how to deal with that, okay? If you want to know a bit more detail on that, go back to Monday's session with me, if you can, in the video, which is about career clarity, and I talk about this slide in a lot more depth. Now, how do you do it? What is a couple of things you want to think about in terms of locking away the monkey or managing yourself a bit more effectively? One of the most damaging things of the lot, folks, is stress. Whenever you're stressed, you can't manage anything. Never mind others, you can't manage yourself. And you see there, it comes through physically, comes through mentally. But what we want to do is we really want to introduce a level of calm. And again, I spoke in much more detail about this on Monday. So again, go back to Monday's video about career clarity, and I'll talk a lot about that. Main point about this one, folks, is there is no magic bullet or there's no magic spell about how to manage yourself. The big thing is getting the basics right. So if you look at the last bullet point about lifestyle, about your body battery, I'm just going to re-emphasize what I talked about on Monday. Your diet, your sleep, exercise, your social circle, and what's going up in your mind, okay? Just have a bit of a think about that and go, am I in the right ballpark with those areas? And if you are, you're definitely in a good place with that. So I'm not going to go too much more into that. It's just about getting a real foundation about the basics. And we should all know it, folks. Don't be eating too much sugar. You know, try and get 30 minutes of exercise a day. Surround yourself with really like-minded people who will help you and raise you up. The basics. So I want to point something else out though. And this is slightly different. And one thing actually, by the way, folks, I should really point out, don't be worrying. None of this is related to accountancy. I coach accountants because that's my game. So therefore, don't be worrying the fact that it's got my logo on it. This is applicable to anyone. So the first thing I want to talk about in terms of energy is this. Now, you're probably wondering what those letters are. And I'm just going to go through them in turn here. Top left-hand corner. In fact, no, tell a lie. Let's go the other way. Top right-hand corner. HPE is high positive energy. You know, whenever you feel really pumped, you feel really, really motivated. Perhaps you're in the gym, you're feeling great, or you get up in the morning and the sun is shining and you feel excellent. So that's high positive energy. Down the bottom right is low positive energy. And low positive energy, believe it or not, is still a really good thing. So maybe you're planning for something, you're maybe reading a book, okay, some really good stuff there. Let's go over to the left-hand side. Top left, you've got high negative energy. That's whenever you're really drained. That's whenever you're really being not a particularly nice person. Maybe you're irritable. And then the bottom left, that's low negative energy, where you're wandering in the wilderness. You really don't know what's going on. And the big red line down the middle is that barrier. And what I really want you to think about is what things can you put in play to create that barrier where if you're going from high positive energy, at least you're just going to go down into low positive energy and you're not going to go across into the left-hand side there. So what are the things you can put in play as a barrier so you can head off it and bounce off it? And I'm going to give you a couple of examples, what I tend to do, because you're better going into low positive energy and recharging yourself in order to manage yourself a bit better. So in the chat box, if you could, I'm just going to ask this question. So how do you protect your energy at the moment? How do you still stay okay or try and manage yourself a bit more? So feel free to put a number of suggestions into the chat box there. And whilst you are doing that, I'm going to tell you how I do it. Okay, so let me just put the next slide up here. So how do I do it? So couple of pictures here just to talk about. Top right hand corner. So I am massive about history. I love culture, I love history. And the more I can go to different places that are of interest to me, it completely recharges me. And I live in near Newcastle and County Down. I believe I live in one of the most historic parts of the world. I absolutely love where I come from. So for example, you look at the top right hand side there, that's an old abbey. And if you look on the horizon, there's a church there, that's St. Patrick's grave. So that's in Downpatrick. So I go to places like that. Just down from that, bottom right hand corner, that's the Mourne Mountains. So again, I will go out and I'll go for a walk. I maybe put a good audiobook on, and I see a lot of suggestions with walking as well, folks. It's absolutely brilliant. And again, just with other things, I take time out. Believe it, if you look at the three ruins actually there in the middle of the slide, that's my village. Believe it or not, that's our old cemetery. So I would go there 2 and 3 times a day, believe it or not, and I will sit in one of the ruined churches and literally take time out. If you look then at a couple of other places where I'm sort of contemplating, believe it or not, if you look at me in the pink t-shirt, that's where Buddha gave his first lecture in India, and that's me doing the whole lotus pose and things like that. And also then I try and read good stuff. Okay, I try and read that good, positive, informative information that just keeps me recharging. Okay, and I see out there absolutely. Someone says about classical music making you smarter. It's Mozart. Apparently, it's called the Mozart effect. If you listen to Mozart, not that it makes you smarter, but it just makes you a bit more relaxed, and hence you can learn a bit more information. So loads of things there to think about, folks. And I see in the comments loads of suggestions. The big thing is this: it's not rocket science. It's right back to basics. So good old walking, good old eating okay, maybe going for a run, talking to someone, somebody, a mentor in your corner. It's really, really important. So that's just some fundamental reminders, folks, of just to get back to basics, because this creates this foundation of how you can actually recompose and manage yourself a bit better. Now, I want to give you an example of what the wee monkey tends to do. The monkey is brilliant at telling you lies. So have you ever been really good at something or done a great piece of work, but actually talked yourself into thinking it's not so good? So this is where the monkey in your mind is doing its job. It's a defense mechanism, and it's defending you from going out of your comfort zone to get hurt. So it'll tell you anything. But let's flip it on the other side. Why not let us think good stuff and tell ourselves good stuff whenever we're going maybe to do a project or doing a piece of work and going to manage other people or whatever we're going to do in our career or even in our personal lives? So maybe you are aware of the conscious and subconscious mind. Essentially, what is this? Approximately 80 to 85% of what you do every single day is completely subconscious. You don't know you're doing it. So the question that I normally tell people, or the example I normally say to people is, did you brush your teeth this morning? They go, yeah, of course I did. Go, do you know how you done it? And they'll go, no. But your subconscious knows how you brushed your teeth this morning because it was directing you. Okay. That's a good old subconscious mind at play. 80 to 85% of what's going on in your head is subconscious. But we're brilliant at subconsciously telling us negative stuff because we've probably told ourselves so much stuff over the years, it happens on autopilot. So why not say stuff to yourself every morning that's positive and think positively on autopilot? So a few suggestions there, if you want to take a photograph or go back and watch this in the video on replay, of a number of suggestions, things that you say to yourself each morning that sort of gets you into a really decent state. Now, you see the fourth bullet, I'm the product of my decisions, not circumstances. I say that to myself every morning because I'm in control of what I'm doing, or I'm in control of the controllables. There's going to be stuff that's going to happen that you have no control over, and you just have to let that go and do its own thing. But be in control of what you can control. Okay. So a couple of things there about it's a really good starting point, folks, is talking to yourself positively. Now, I know there's been workshops in this during this week, and I'm not going to go into resilience in any great detail. But all I want to do again is just to give you some very quick reminders in order to actually keep that foundation solid. And then what we're going to do is move forward into a bit more self-awareness. So if you look, for example, bottom there, health, nutrition, sleep, exercise, the good old basics. You look at the top right of composure, of regulating the emotions. Mindfulness or meditation or going for that walk or run is brilliant at doing that. And then if you look at the top left, collaboration, support networks. So if you're talking about having a network of people, go into yesterday's talk, whenever I was talking about it's about who knows you in that session, and tells you how to build that community of supportive people. So I'm not going to go into any more depth on resilience. There's a load of great talks this week on that. Again, just a number of reminders about the basics of it. And why am I saying all this? Because we want to build a foundation with all that stuff, all the basics we've spoken about, because we want to understand if we are composed, if we are in a good state, how do we impact other people? Because that is why or how we're going to get noticed in our career, our impact on others. So this is a really good exercise. And what I want you to do is to get 2 A4 pages or simply one side of one A4 page. And I want you to write one thing on one side, which is ask your friends and family, what impression do you give or would you give a complete stranger? And ask the people who will give you the honest answer. So ask that family member or ask that friend who won't sugarcoat it, who will actually tell you the truth. So one side of a page, I want you to get the feedback and I want you to write down the impression that you would currently give a stranger. Then what I want you to do is on the other side of the page, I want you to write down your honest assessment of what impression would you like to give a complete stranger. And then you need to understand the gaps, okay? You need to be aware of your shortcomings in that. And this is where self-awareness comes in. This is where you need to understand yourself a bit more. Now, the thing with that is, and there's a great free resource on this, brilliant actually. If this next slide will come up. Your leadership style, and again, like I'm talking about, leadership is where you will get noticed in your career. It grows out of your personality type. So if we look at a couple of examples, Steve Jobs was the ultra analyst. He was the detailed guy. You had Nelson Mandela, who was the ultra fantastic diplomat and got people together. And you've got Richard Branson, who's the adventurer and the explorer. And they can bring other people with them in so many different ways. So what I want you to do is I want you to go and find out how you do it yourself. And if you go on to 16personalities.com, you can actually take a free personality test. And that gives you so much more awareness of what's happening. Because if you are aware, folks, of what's happening, you can actually improve, that gap that I just spoken about, but how would you impress other people? Really, really important. So what I'd like you to do as well now in the chat box is fire down what do you think your main personality trait is. Okay, so put it down in the chat box. The one thing I think my strongest personality trait is I can build rapport with people like that pretty quick. And that's the reason why I've moved into the area of coaching. Because for some strange reason, people feel quite at ease with me very, very quickly. I think I take it from my dad. My dad is brilliant at it. So I see some great things here. Chatty, persistent, friendly, and approachable. Absolutely. And they're great traits to have. So what you want to do is you want to really enhance those traits. But whenever you do the personality test, you want to see the things that you're falling down on. And that's what you really need to work on. Okay. So believe it or not, this is quite a negative trait in a way, but I'm sometimes too trusting of others. Okay. Whereas I might need to hold back ever so slightly. Absolutely. So someone has just mentioned empathetic. I'm hugely empathetic, but sometimes you can give too much and not receive anything back in return. So sometimes you need that slight bit of a mix there. Okay. So folks, in your own time, I would definitely stress, have a look at that personality test. It's really, really fascinating, by the way, as well. Okay, next tool I want to share with you. That's really, really good. We've probably heard of a good old SWOT analysis, okay? And we've probably tended to do a SWOT analysis on a business or in an industry. Maybe you've done it in your degree, maybe you've done it previously. But have you ever done it on yourself? Really, really interesting. Really interesting. So what I would do, folks, is I would actually do the personality test first, and then go, okay, I've learned this one. I've learned this personality test, or I've understood the outcomes. Let's put it into a SWOT analysis and see what actually comes out. The really interesting things are those opportunities and those threats. So again, I'm not going to labor on it in terms of too much detail. Hopefully you're all aware of what a SWOT analysis actually is, but go and try it out on yourself as well. Again, Google personal SWOT analysis, and then you'll definitely get a video on YouTube about how to actually do it. It's really, really, really interesting. So that's the third element of self-awareness I want to touch upon. Now, fourth element, and again, it's all these wee tools and techniques. You can actually do it in the morning time and just doodle. So this is another one, is how do you monitor your self-management or your self-performance? So what I want you to do, folks, is again, something to do at the weekend, maybe something to do in an evening. It's not too taxing, but it's really productive. Is to do a bit of a mind map. And you write James's performance, or whatever your name is, James's performance map. You put it in the middle and you do your spider diagram. And I want you to think of some of these questions. Really, really good stuff. So what time do you spend on particular roles or particular projects? Do you like them or do you not? And if you're spending too much time on something you don't like, you have to think about that. What are you really good at? Also, what are you not good at? Fourth bullet point, and we'll talk about this in a second. One of the biggest things that I want you to all to take away from this, folks, what can you delegate? A skill that I never knew anything about 10 or 12 years ago, which is probably the most fundamental skill I wish I knew back then. And then what do you need to coach other people? So what skills do you need to take on board in order, again, to improve others? Okay. So in terms of self-awareness, loads of tools there. Loads of tools and techniques. And again, hopefully you can get a bit of a more of an understanding of you. So again, in the chat box, folks, I want you to fire in a couple of ideas. What skills do you think? And literally, I don't want you to do too much overthinking on this, but just off the top of your head, what skills do you think you need to develop? Because once you do this exercise and understand it, go and find those tools, go and find the people you need to talk to, go and understand the book you need to go and read. What podcast or what YouTube video can you watch? And then you can really start to improve, okay? So what I want to do now at the minute, I want to touch upon then some individual aspects of things. Again, whenever I'm doing this, feel free to put in the chat box, what skills do you need to develop? So one thing I want to touch upon, let's get the slide to move forward, is assertiveness. Hugely important skill, but not to be confused with aggressiveness. People think you're being, very, very, very assertive. Can you bring to mind, or can you think of someone who says something in a very considered, very well-mannered way and brings people with them? So can you bring someone to mind in that? Very assertive in their stance. So for example, Barack Obama, whenever he was being, grilled on a particular topic, he was actually really good at being quite assertive. And he brought people with him without being hugely aggressive. So if you look there at that line, the new currency of business, this is really important now. The new currency of business, folks, is built on empathy and trust. The old way of work was more ruthless, etc. But now we're all moving to empathy and trust. And you need to really stand up for yourself whenever you need to, but you need to do it with dignity and integrity. How are you going to do it? If you have got that self-confidence of doing those affirmations or doing that really good self-talk in advance of any situation, you need to be assertive. Really, 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 really powerful. Also, be really conscious of how you're breathing. Again, it's something I spoke about on Monday. So if you go back to Monday's video, you'll see what I spoke about 5 by 5 by 5. So before the event, take in a breath for 5 seconds, hold for 5 seconds, and release for 5 seconds. But also be really aware of your posture. Whenever we're back face to face, How are you standing? How is those normal non-verbal communication styles playing out? Okay. And then you have to have boundaries. And what I mean by that, what are you going to take? Or what's that line you're not going to cross? So have that thought out in advance. And then take the courage to act on it and have those conversations with people in a really strong manner. And I don't mean aggressive. Okay. So that's something just to point out that I actually think it's really important, especially in today's world of business and of growing your career. Now, another real common buzzword at the minute. If you're ever on LinkedIn, for example, it's wall-to-wall emotional intelligence, but it's actually really important. So, for example, if the example I was telling you about me going to work or me being promoted into a manager's role. So James was really good at his job in terms of being a trainee chartered accountant. I was a really good auditor, and they went, okay, you've got skills, you've got potential, you're going to be promoted to senior manager. And I really, really struggled, folks, because I didn't have a clue about emotional intelligence. I purely believed career was on your intellectual capabilities. That's all I knew, but it's not. So if you look at the quote there, your EQ, not purely cognitive abilities. So it's not just your IQ or your intelligence. You have to use it in a really, really subtle way, like I've said many times, to bring others with you. But you need to be aware of your own self first. So again, if you want to put stuff into the chat box, can you name one emotional intelligence trait? So what do you think is really important with emotional intelligence? And another suggestion, again in your own time, is if you want to Google emotional intelligence traits, or sorry, emotional intelligence tests, I should say, and see how emotionally intelligent you actually are. Okay, that's what's going to make you a really good leader now moving forward, is to have strong emotional intelligence. People now will not put up with the aggression, but people will follow the leader who will take them in a certain way. Okay, so it's a very much a subtle difference. And there's some really great suggestions there in the chat box, but I'm just going to touch on some of them. Absolutely, social skills, etc., and empathy. I see there as well in the chat box. Okay, so I'm not going to go through these at all. And again, if you want to take a screenshot or take a photograph, by all means, do that. But if you look at the left-hand side, how we manage ourselves, and that's what I want you to really think about and to look at. And all this week, all the sessions will cover all of that. Okay, so I'm not really going to go into that in any depth because you can go and see about those things yourself. I just really want to make you aware of that, of emotional intelligence. There are books galore, there are loads of articles, videos, etc., etc. But there's some really good stuff there as well, folks, okay? Now, I did touch on one particular skill that I really, really want you to focus on. It's the good old saying of, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And the reason why I put this slide in today was, I was actually watching Dragon's Den last week. Has anybody ever watched Dragon's Den? And my favorite dragon is a guy called Peter Jones. And he said that very quote to the person who was making the pitch, because the person was just absolutely rattling off everything, being very defensive. And lo and behold, they didn't get an offer. And Peter Jones turned around and said, you've been given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listen to the feedback that we're giving you. And I went, that's brilliant. And it's one of the most crucial skills you can do now, folks. And I just want to give you a couple of things to think about, because if you can put this into your self-management skills and arsenal, this is really going to make you stand out from the crowd. Okay. If you then go and manage others on a team and you listen to their concerns, they'll do anything for you. They'll do anything for you. So, how can you listen with your eyes? How can you listen with your heart? Really strange way of putting it, but let me give you a couple of pointers on it. So you can actually listen by your eye contact. And how can you do that? Because you're giving the signal that you're being attentive to what the other person is talking about by giving proper eye contact, and that you're not slouching, that your body language is appropriate. Look at the eye. Don't interrupt. Let's give people their time. And if you can time it in the right way, when there's an appropriate pause, then you can give your opinion or you can give your comment. The S, and the S is a great tool, especially if you don't have a notion or a clue about what that person is talking about. You try and give a summary of what has been said, and then you ask the question, have I captured that right? Or does that make sense? It's brilliant, because by saying that, it actually gives the person another opportunity to gain clarity. Okay. Obviously, give a person enough time to speak and encourage people to speak. Again, folks, if you're getting into a management position, or if you're actually going to be part of a team whenever you graduate, or maybe you currently are now, you need to give each other encouragement with that. And then the last one. The last one is nurture, but you can do it also non-verbally. So shaking the head, yes, no, the sounds, think about those things because they're very subtle. And if you don't do those, people think you aren't listening. So have a think about that. They're really important steps, really small things, really basic things. But again, they make a massive difference, okay? So because of that's really the self-awareness piece. What I really want to do now is to give you some tools and techniques in terms of, okay, I understand myself a bit better. Hopefully I can manage myself a bit better in terms of emotional, in terms of personality traits, etc. But what I want to do is I want to give you some proper practical tools that you can use day to day. And the first thing is, if you've ever heard of the Pareto Principle, the 80-20 rule, okay, 80% of the effects come from 20% of causes. Now, the biggest example I can give you of that is that in general in business, 80% of a company's turnover will come from 20% of their clients. So that's the Pareto Principle. Now, if you look at the last two bullets, that doesn't mean that you only work 20% of the time to get 80% of the results. It doesn't work like that. But what we can do is that really productive 20%, which is part of the rule, we can actually expand that. And those are a couple of the tools and techniques I want to talk about now. But first of all, before all this is a classic thing, a classic barrier that gets in the way. And just as if someone could put a thumbs up if this relates, do you procrastinate? How many people on the call now actually procrastinate? If you put a thumbs up. So people are saying definitely. I have no doubt there's going to be a load here. Absolutely. And the thing is, folks, it's this. What you do or your mindset or anything I've spoken about so far is completely meaningless if you beat around the bush and you don't do anything about it. So what are the things you need to look out for, and those traits that come through with you that you need to go, look, James, you need to catch yourself on and stop doing this in order to move forward. Now, I'm an accountant. I was a huge perfectionist, and it still is a work in progress. The good old Pareto principle. Do you know something, folks? See if something's 80% done. That's actually better than most people's 100%. So again, do not let, the good old thing about perfectionism and paralysis via analysis. Don't let that happen. Sometimes you need to move forward. That also feeds into indecisiveness. The other third point there, folks, CS damn thing I was going to say, the phone, that has completely engendered a culture of comparing with other people. Don't do it. Like someone said to me, do you know the good old racehorse, and it's got its blinkers on? So a racehorse will run its own race. So just be very wary whenever you're comparing with someone and it makes you freeze and stop doing stuff. Just move on. That's all rooted, folks, in fear. And I have no doubt this has been mentioned in the talks during this week. is that fear means false expectations appearing real. The thing that you're afraid of hasn't happened yet, no doubt about it. So why would you be afraid of something that hasn't happened? Okay, especially if you're in control of some of those controllables. So have a think about that. Have a think about those red flags. If something happens, go, yeah, that boy James Perry mentioned that. I've got to go and have a bit of a look and become more aware and stop doing that as much. Okay, that's the first thing I want you to think about. Second thing I want you to think about, and again, you can take a screenshot of this because I'm not going to go through it, but it's a really handy slide actually, is how can you become more productive? Now, I'm not saying how do you become more busy and how do you work 24/7. No, we want to become really smart at this. So do you know some people who are effortless at getting stuff done? And this is where some of the tips I want to talk to you about. Why do I want to do that? Because the more time, if you can do things more efficiently, it actually gives you more time to go and lead and to add significant value to others. You get noticed and hence your career goes skyward. So how to become more productive? Planning, hugely important. Do you use, for example, Google Calendar? I use it all the time. So everything goes into set blocks of time. I call it pockets of productivity. So I will do certain things. So for example, I will do my uni stuff in the morning time, and then I'll start to do my own business stuff in the afternoon. And then if I need to, I might spend maybe a mop-up session, maybe from 9 until 11 on a Saturday morning. Okay. So have a thought about that and put it into Google Calendar, into set blocks. Absolutely brilliant. Other thing is, folks, do your least favorite task first. See that thing you've been putting off? You're not going to get it finished. So you might as well do it first and get it out of the way, because then you can then go and start to do work that's more enjoyable. Organizational systems, yeah, I mentioned Google Calendar. There are many other systems you can use, but I just use Google Calendar because I can sync it with my phone. Talking of phone, what about eliminating distractions? Whenever you want to get a piece of work done, where is this? This is the biggest time waster of the lot. So if it's a problem, folks, in terms of distractions, make sure you have to do something about it, okay? And then the next one, delegation. And I'm going to talk about that a bit more in a second. Again, get a bit of a screenshot of that. There are loads of tools and techniques about how to become more productive. And one of the most crucial ways, another technique, is actually to get an A4 page. Get your file page like this. And I want, apologies. Let's go back to the previous slide. I want you to get an A4 page. I want you to divide it into 4. And you can do this once a week. It's called a time management matrix, or it's also called the Eisenhower box. Okay. So you can split it into 4. Urgent, important, not urgent, and split up into those quadrants. And if you look at average leaders or average managers, you will hear them all the time complain they don't have enough time to do stuff. But yet you see the really effective leaders in business swanning about and they've got no problem gaining time. And why is that? Because they focus on the important stuff. Okay. And if you know at the start of each week what's important and what's urgent and you get it done, you can understand what stuff you don't have to do or stuff that you can actually delegate to other people. And that is where the skill lies. Okay. That's what I didn't know whenever I was a young manager. Didn't have a clue. Why? Because I thought I had to do everything myself. And looking back, you can't. So get a look at that again. Maybe take a screenshot of that one if you can, because that's really good. And look at the detail there. And the last thing I want to point out, the last skill I really want to point out, and the reason why I've left this to last, folks, is because I believe this is one of the most important skills you can adopt. And this is one of the most important skills that all leaders can do effortless, without any effort. And that's delegating. And I want to point out 4 things that you need to look at whenever you're delegating a piece of work. Now, that can be delegating to your peers, maybe you're in a team, or whenever you're starting to climb through the ranks whether it'll be in 1 year, whether it'll be in 2 years, or maybe you are in that management level now. How do you do it? First of all, you have to understand, what are you actually going to delegate? What bit of work are you going to give someone else to do? Then you need to understand the person you're going to give it to. How much work have they got? Are they ultra stressed? But what's in it for them? You need to sell it to them. So you're going to say, I've got a piece of work, and you're really going to learn something from this. If you can do it for me, would that be okay? Because folks, what I'd done when I was a young manager, I didn't delegate. So what did I do? I was ultra stressed out because I had so much work. I didn't have enough time, but also I was doing my staff a disservice because they weren't learning anything from me because I kept it all to myself. So double-edged sword. Next step, you agree the criteria. So you go to that person and you go, okay, I have a bit of work here and my expectations are X, Y, and Z. You really point it out and spell it out and say, okay, in 2 days' time, we're going to have a bit of a review to see where you are with things. And the last point there, this is where your listening comes in, your listening skills. You make sure there's going to be feedback. You make sure you're going to praise that person, but then you listen to the response of this question that you're going to ask. Is there anything I can do to help you? Is there anything else that you need a bit of help with, etc., etc.? And this really opens up the communication. But the big thing is, folks, do you see, if you give someone a piece of work and they do it really well, the trust really, really helps. And therefore, every time you give a certain bit of work off to that other person, they will do it to their best of their ability. Really, really, really important skill for you to learn, folks. So that's accelerated self-management. That was accelerated by me. It was a really, really quick whiz through all that. I could speak for days on a number of those individual topics. But folks, what I want to do is let's touch upon, if we can, Angie, was there any really compelling greatest accomplishments did you note? Because I'm going to tell you mine.
Okay, I'm just going to share my video. Yeah, there was a couple of accomplishments. Someone had won a gold, awarded a gold medal from the Pope John Paul. Someone had learned to abseil and swim. Others had led youth groups, so they had went in and made a difference to different individuals in different youth groups. What else was there? Others had taken up different hobbies. So there was a few, very interesting. Yeah.
Brilliant stuff, brilliant stuff. Well, folks, mine is two different accomplishments, but they sort of are in the same theme. So I've been to one of the highest places in the world, and also I've been to the lowest place in the world. So the picture on the left, and I was struggling there, folks. I was having severe altitude sickness there. That's in the highest pass in the world. So it's the highest transition between one mountain and another, in the middle of the Himalayas there. So I was struggling at 18,500 feet there on the left. And on the right is the Dead Sea, which is the lowest point on the planet. So that is probably two different accomplishments, but they're sort of in the same thing. So thanks everyone very, very much for sharing those. And that's really the end of the session, folks. Thanks for that. Like I said, it was a real speedy, accelerated session where hopefully you can go and take away some of those tools and techniques and go and think about them a bit more and adopt them. And if there is a few things I would adopt, is the two most important in my opinion. Go and look at your personality test and look at what they're saying you need to strengthen up on. And delegation, folks, really, really important stuff. If you can do that now, wait till you see your career grow. So thanks very much, so much for listening. Feel free to connect. And the best way to connect with me, folks, is on LinkedIn. You go onto LinkedIn, type in James Perry or Accounting Success Coach, and send me a DM. I would love to chat to you. And if you need any further advice, it'd be really be great to chat to you. Also, again, LinkedIn is the main one. If there's any final questions, though, feel free to ask. I'll be here for the next couple of minutes, and I'll be a pleasure to answer anything that comes through in that. Okay, so, oh, someone's raised their hand.
I think Katie.
Katie, yep.
I think Katie, did you have a question? Maybe she's just raised it accidentally there. I'm not sure if she was leaving and she's raised it accidentally.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, again, folks, if you have any questions, ping it in the chat box or feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Okay, I'll just put the last slide up, Angie.
Yep. Okay. Thank you so much for that, James. That was a really interesting session, and there was definitely things in that I'm going to take away from my own learning and development. I mean, just like the basics, like active listening and emotional intelligence. I can't wait to get off and actually do the wee emotional intelligence test, because we're all very interested to see where we lie with that. But thanks so much for your time, and thanks to everybody who's on the call and who gave their time up to come to this session today. Folks, don't forget that we've got a day and a half left of the week's events. And right after this one, we've got the Northern Ireland ladies football team who are doing a session. Now, I don't think it's all going to be about football, so it doesn't matter if you're not a fan of football. It's really about how they got to where they are today, getting into the Euro 2022 final. So a lot of real good kind of advice and kind of good stories to share there. So don't forget about that. And then we also have James actually covered a bit of the growth mindset, and that was part of your session. So there's a session on that tomorrow from Katie Matthews from the Mind Tribe from 12 to 1. I've put that into the chat as well. So that will be around the growth mindset, and again, some real good exercises and some real good takeaways to help you going forward. And then brilliant way to finish up a Friday afternoon is the brilliant David Mead is tomorrow, 1:30 to 2:30. So the slots are fairly booking up for that, and I'm looking forward to that myself. And that's kind of going to wrap up the whole week event, and it's about unlocking your future and really giving you skills and advice to go out into the world of work in the pandemic that we're in. So don't miss out on that. Also, guys, we have lots of placements and graduate opportunities on our Handshake platform. So you'll find that I'll just put the link into the Handshake platform, but there's hundreds of placements and hundreds of graduate opportunities for those who haven't yet secured a graduate role. And our employability advisors are available this week, next week, and even throughout the summer. You can book into one-to-one sessions with our employability advisors if you're still not clear of where you're going or what direction, or you just need any kind of advice or want to speak to one of them. They're available. Again, you can get them you can email them at careers@Ulster, or you can find them on the Handshake by booking the one-to-one coaching. So that's really it. Once again, thank you so much for your session today, James. I thought it was really, really interesting, and I'm definitely going to use some of those in my job. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to stay around for 5-10 minutes if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, I'll stay for another couple of minutes as well, absolutely.
The week has just went so fast. It's just been bump, bump, bump. It's been great. But yeah, that was really good.
I think there's something came through there, Angie. We'll just check the chat.
Oh, yeah. Okay. What's the best way to come across as assertive in delegating without feeling guilty for giving people more work?
That's probably where you need to do the assessment of the person. So it's stage number 2 there in terms of delegation. Who you're going to delegate it to, and you need to understand what their workload actually is. Do they have the capacity and the capability of doing it? But then, Catherine, you need to be quite savvy in the piece of work you're going to give them. If you're just giving staff rubbish for rubbish's sake, they're not going to appreciate it. So if it's something interesting and you can sell it to them, maybe in an assertive manner of going, do you know something? There's a great bit of work and you'll learn so much from it. That will really sell it, and they'll maybe go, yeah, okay, I'll take it on for you. So do it in that way. It's the way you sell it to someone. You're going to learn something from this.
It's actually a form of flattery as well.
Yeah.
I was kind of in a session where someone said, when someone asks you to do something, it's nearly a form of flattery because they're trusting you to do it. So it's it's good to ask people to do things because, as you say, they're feeling like they're being trusted with a task or a project.
Yeah, it's also a bit like Angie. Why are listening skills so important? But it's because other people love talking about themselves, and that's the reason why listening is very important.
Yeah. It's that a lot of people listen thinking about what they're going to say next rather than actively listening and just kind of digesting the information. I think.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. That was great advice. Anyone else got any questions?
No.
No. Well, I think there's 6 people still on, so we'll hang around for another couple of minutes. But I think, as I said, if there's any questions, you can email the careers at Ulster directly, and all of the previous events from this week, if any of you have missed any, you can catch them on the YouTube, on Ulster's YouTube channel. So all the recordings of previous events are going to be on the YouTube channel. So you can go in and download them and watch them at your leisure. For anybody that couldn't make certain events that they wanted to go to.
Brilliant.
Okay, well, I think that wraps it up for now, James. Unless there's anything else that you want to add, or
Again, folks, if you want to, drop me a line on LinkedIn, I've absolutely no problem. It'd be great to have to answer your question or even have a chat. So feel free to connect on LinkedIn.
yeah, and LinkedIn's a great way for building up, your professional network. It's an amazing tool for actually, building up those connections in terms of even sourcing roles and everything. It's all there. LinkedIn is a great kind of professional network as well. Yeah.
Without a doubt, absolutely.
I'm just going to put the wee link for handshake in here too, just for the. I think that's everyone gone now, James. And there was 2 left there, so they've just left there now. So yes, I think that's everyone gone now. So thank you so much for that. That was great, and there was good interaction there from the students, wasn't there?
Do you hear me okay, Angie?